Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
As well. There'll be a solution for that as well. And technology is potentially going to help us. You know, I can envision an urban environment where you have these additional dwelling units. You have maybe your starter place is that additional dwelling unit or that what you would call a tiny house, I would say a smaller house. Maybe it's just going to migrate over into that. And then if you're living close to a downtown area where you work, you know, maybe a couple or a young family, they have one car, lessons it, but they're getting around on electric scooters or something else. You know, I ride my e-bike as much as I possibly can on the weekend because I just have so much fun doing it.
Yeah.
It's a blast and it's exercise. So I think there's ways that we could adjust this, and the traditional model of, you know, a house this size with this kind of a backyard and this kind of, that might have to change a little bit.
It's going to. It has to.
It could be great. It could be even better than it ever was.
Yeah.
In terms of communities being like villages and really being close to everything within walking distance, it could be remarkably great. And I just think that, you know, look at it glass half full rather than half empty. But I did not know that.
Look at what can be done.
Diego did that.
Look at what can be done, right? The question you ask is, how can I make this happen?
Right.
That's the question you ask, instead of, why is it that this always happens to me, right? Or, you know, I can't do this. Just right. When I have a 23-year-old and a 25-year-old, and when they were growing up, they were not allowed to use a word in the household, and it was can't.
Right.
We don't use that word.
Right.
So every time they used it, or every time they tried to use it, we stopped it.
Right.
Okay. Now they've grown up and they don't use that word. And now they look at the world in terms of possibility, not in terms of restriction. So it's, you know, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, negativity is going to come in your life in various ways. People have been played with that. Young people have been played with that. But I do think it's up to us as the older people, the mentors, the coaches, you know, I'm a dad to my daughter. I'm a dad to a lot of people. You know, and my wife's culture, you know, people come over the house, they all call me uncle from all the kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, you are an uncle. And you can try to impart these things to people would be helpful, and you know, hopefully be able to do as much to influence policies and stuff that will really make a material change.
Yeah, we have to take our role seriously.
What's that?
We have to take our role seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
As an uncle, as a dad, you know, right?
And here's another one. Since we're getting on the housing stock, here's another little bit of political pet peeve. I told you one would be coming.
Yeah.
Right? I'm all for electric cars, definitely low emissions, all that stuff. I do think we've bypassed the value of hybrids a little bit more than we could, because it's an affordable entry point for most people. But if you're going to legislate the demand by mandating the use of cars, which I think is great, you need to do something to assure the supply.
Right.
So I think that a goal for an American president, Senate, a governor of any state, is to make sure that the supply of electric power is affordable, is regular, it is a reliable, and if it powers your cars, if it powers your phones, if it powers your work at home station, or your work at home station, or your at work station, or however you blend your work life going into the future, It powers all of your devices, all of your smart everythings that you have,
Mhm.
and maybe even your vehicles, so you have a clean environment. We need a supply.
Yeah.
And we should be focusing on if we're going to be building infrastructure, to be building electric infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's my thing.
I agree. I believe we're headed down a road we don't want to go down. And I think we're headed to brownouts. I think we're headed to just a disaster potentially. And, you know, it's absolutely, you're spot on. This grid has got to get improved.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You're in touch with San Diego.
Mhm.
What's the general feeling in the population of San Diego about expanded nuclear power? And
They don't like it.
They don't like it.
And I'll tell you, you know, we're still trying to figure out why San Onofre was closed. Okay.
Yeah.
But we believe that the reason for it was the environmental push. You have members, and some of them are militant, okay, but you have members of the Sierra Club active that are now in leadership all over San Diego County and city, okay? And part of the reason we have a housing shortage. So I don't know if you know who Alan Nevin is, but Alan's one of the top economists in the nation. He was our very first interview for our podcast. Good friend of mine. He's been on my radio show since 2011. And Alan told us in 2019 on radio, I was interviewing him, that if we don't import one person into San Diego County more than we export, if that just stays constant, we need organically in San Diego County 12,500 new units built and sold every year. We've never gotten near that number.
You're talking about housing stock.
Housing.
Yeah.
We've not gotten anywhere near that number for a long, long time. So think about this for a second. In some of those years, 2008, 2009, 2010, we were building and selling a couple of thousand units down here. We were 10,000 plus units a year short.
Yeah. Oh, well, I know when I was in the 80s, San Diego County was, I mean, it just was booming in terms of, I remember riding down on the 15 when I first came to San Diego County and seeing a sign on a stone monument on the 15 that had no traffic on it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It was just wide open, and it said, "Coming soon, Carmel Mountain Ranch." Yeah. You know, it's like, okay, and there's that whole big one over there, and there was, because people were coming, and they did a good job. You know, there are a lot of good neighborhoods. They're really well planned and they're really well laid out. There's really good places to live. I think people are really happy about it, but we gotta build more of them. They've got to be sustainable. I'm going to say, look, we learned a lot from our friends in the environmental community. I mean, they tell us, what we got to watch out for, and they're right about a lot of things, but also people have to have some place to live. So we've got to blend our things together, and we got to have electric power. Yeah. Got to have electric power and solar. Yes, for it. The current technology that they're thinking about having, where they can harness the currents under the ocean. Great. Wind, we got wind out here. You come into Palm Springs, you're going to see these wind. It's great. All of that stuff, geothermal is great. Don't see how, if you want to cut greenhouse emissions in the short term, you could avoid looking at nuclear. And if and if somebody like the governor of, it was on 60 Minutes, the governor of the state of Wyoming, they're building these Bill Gates type, in the ground, smaller reactors cooled with some kind of salt type thing. It's like really protective. We're not talking about a mismanaged Chernobyl. As a Ukrainian American, I'm very aware of that. Right. But talking about, smaller, containable, very safe, maybe in outlying areas where they'll be very protected. And who are they going to be selling that electric power to? Us here in California. They're building it to export it.
That's exactly what they're doing.
France right now is, I think my numbers are correct. Had the opportunity to be there this last summer, and I was reading when we were in Paris. It was 80% of their, something like 80%.
You're right.
Nuclear. It's an increasing amount is renewables.
Mhm.
Very impressive. It's in the double digits. And I think it's like 7 or 8% of electricity generation is fossil fuels.
Yeah.
They export to the rest of Europe because they wanted to be energy independent.
Mhm.
And so that's what they did.
Yeah.
And if France can do it, which is a liberal democracy,
Exactly.
why wouldn't we be able to do
Yeah.
it as opposed to what? Burning coal?
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, it's like you got to weigh it out a little bit. And so I think we have to have the discussion.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And you see some people like what they're doing over in Wyoming, they're going into it a little bit more heavy. And so we'll see what happens with that.
And Wyoming's embracing it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're embracing it. They also had something about where, I'm not sure if coal can ever be clean, but they're talking about they do have some technologies where they can capture the
Yeah.
I don't, as it's I guess coming out or trap it. They're not there yet, but if you look at the numbers, the world's population is growing. We want to get off of fossil. I think that the goal is to get off of fossil fuels, but how do you get off of them in the next 20 to 30 years without some bridge technologies helping us get there? I mean,
something's got to fill it in.
Yeah, got to fill it in.
It's a gap, and something's got to fill it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I have a recommendation for you. Alan Nevin, who I told you about, just had a book released. We actually interviewed him last month about it, called The Next Half Century. And I would highly recommend reading it. It is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We have an idea, you and I, of what the world looks like and where we're headed and all that kind of thing. This will turn it on its head for you.
It will.
And this book will absolutely turn it on its head. It's called
an economist.
Basically. Yeah, The Next Half Century. Yeah.
Okay, I'll look at that. I think I saw you speaking with him. I was watching some of the videos, and I saw you speaking with him for a little bit. He seems like a very cerebral guy, forward-thinking.
He's one of the smartest people you'll ever meet in your life. I guarantee it. And that book that he's got another book that he's writing that he's going to be done with in about 10 months. And we're going to have him back on the podcast to talk about that too. But this one he just had released in October, and it's called The Next Half Century, and I would highly recommend it.
Do you ever do in your podcast where you have multiple people, like in a panel discussion going back and forth, like where you would have a topic and people would talk about this? Because this housing thing, getting this housing thing off the ground is something that, I mean, this should be, electric power, housing for Californians, affordable housing for Californians, and affordable electricity for Californians. Everybody should be all over that. I mean, there's nothing else that they really need to worry about. There's a lot of things, but there's really, if you did that, look at all the social ills that would probably be completely satisfied.
Yeah.
Of a safe place to live, and they can afford to run it, and they can afford to get where they're going, and in a economically sane way. A lot of other things are going to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah, we have not graduated to that yet, the panel discussion thing, but we will be. It's probably going to be, we may end up doing it before that, but once we have a studio built, because we're just 3 months into this, or a little over 3 months into this, so we're sort of at our infancy. We're at 80 plus episodes anyway. And so, we're on our way, but once we have our studio built, we'll be doing more panel type discussions and that kind of thing. And one of the things that we're working on, I had the chairwoman of the San Diego County Republican Party on the other day, and we interviewed her. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking to leaders, and we're going to be talking to people that are prospective leaders, right? And having this type of a conversation where we need to figure out a way to solve this problem. And the best way to do it that I can think of is let's sit down and let's listen to each other. Okay. Absolutely. This is not a Democratic, this is not a Republican, this is not an independent. this is not a subject that is partisan. This is a subject that is quality of life, and it's about leaving this place better than the way we found it. Democrats want that. Independents want that, and so do Republicans.
Everybody wants that.
Exactly. So
And
that's our thing that ties us in a common way. And so we need to work with that.
right. I ran into a city councilman recently. I was at the gym, and there's a gentleman up here who's on the city council for the city of Palm Desert. And I actually think city of Palm Desert is run pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he says about local politics, he says, he runs a desert touring operation that takes Jeeps out into the desert. And so he has to deal with the BLM land and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he has an electric bike store and all that kind of stuff. See him at the gym every once in a while. And he says, look, when we're in this type of an environment, city environment, everybody's getting together. We're not really talking about what might be the hot point national issues. We're talking about making sure the roads are fixed and making sure that everything's, you've got safe, good water delivery, safe, the trash is getting picked up on time and everything. And that you have a good tax base and that you have programs to enable the things that we're talking about. And I think that's where you just let all this partisanship, there is no partisanship. There's no room for it. And you don't have to have it.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to benefit from the things that we're talking about. And it'll bring us more together. But you're absolutely right. Got to listen.
Yeah.
Got to listen to the other side. Got to listen to someone else who has a point of view. And just sit yourself down into a room and listen to each other until you figure out the course that you're going to take to go forward to make things happen.
There's a way. There's absolutely a way. Now, it's not necessarily this way or this way, but it's somewhere here, right? So like one of my best friends, who was the best man at my wedding, I was getting ready to interview him on my radio show on KFMB, and I was standing in the parking lot next to his car talking to him. And I asked him, I said, so are you a Republican? And he said, no. He said, I'm independent. And I said, do you mind if I ask you why? And this is the reason I'm asking, I'm telling you this is, if you met him, you really would think that he was Republican, right? He's pretty conservative and conservative values and all that. And I said, do you mind if I ask you why? He said, I'm perfectly happy to tell you. He said, years ago, I used to drive into Los Angeles and I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And he said, and now I drive to Los Angeles and I can actually see the buildings.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
He said, Democrats don't have all the answers, but they got it right with that.
On emissions,
right on every side. You with me?
Absolutely.
And I never forgot that.
100%. I mean, and you look back historically, where we would get to the point where we would think that the environmental people who are for the environment are only Democrats.
Yeah.
Well, Richard Nixon. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Nixon. I mean, he had a terrible implosion of his presidency. We all know that. But Republican started the EPA.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was bolstered the Food and Drug Administration. I mean, there were things that people said, look, well, we want to have, clean air and clean water. We want to have all these different things. So there are places of commonality that they're not, it's not Democrat or Republican. It's just common sense.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to have get back to that a little bit. I mean, what we have now is the antithesis of all of that, and it just seems we're perhaps going to be mired in that for a little bit longer. But it could change. It could change to where we get some sensible people up there that put the these goals that we're talking about first. And I think where you start with that is at the local level. Mm-hmm. And where you start with that is also at the state level. I mean, I just think that if we have a governor or House representatives of the Assembly and the Senate and up in Sacramento that are committed to those things. We got a housing problem in California. We need to get more housing, and we're going to have to do some things to it. We're going to have to make sure that it's built correctly and it's not going to, destroy the environment or hurt any endangered species or any of those things. 100% for that. Not just paying lip service to that, because
Right.
I'm not a registered Republican either, but I do vote. I vote who I think is the best person.
Yeah.
And my politics have probably up to this point been traditionally more on one side than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll find a lot of people that are fiscally conservative, but socially liberal in the way of mind your own business for
Mm-hmm.
one thing, treat other people as you would be treated, leave them alone. We could deal with that with just some basic ethics in our society.
Well, dignity, right? It's dignity.
Dignity, right?
Yeah.
Just treat other people as you would be treated, as we've been taught by in some belief systems, and recognize that we're not here all by ourselves. There's a lot of different ways of looking at that higher power, but we're not alone, and we have to be cognizant of that. And if you do that, I think you get this commonality of purpose that can take us over the humps of differences that don't have to be blown up all the time to be, something that just creates this impossible level of inertia.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So anyway.
Well, this has been fun. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
I probably babbled on too long. I'm sure
you did great. You did great.
I'll be back if you want me back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to do this again.
Yeah, for sure. This is
appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
I really want to know what you're doing with keep me posted.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. I really enjoyed our time together. And I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. So thank you for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you, bud. Take care. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.